They called themselves a lodge, but the word had been peeled and repainted so many times it meant nothing anymore. What met me beneath the abandoned customs house on the river was a geometry of men and money and hunger arranged with ritual elegance around a black stone pyramid no taller than a child, its apex capped by a lidless, glassy eye that was not glass. I came there as a journalist. No, that's the myth I tell myself. I came there as a boy who had once learned that secrets were a currency, and I had spent the last of my small coins on a tip whispered by a forger in a coffee house that smelled like scorched milk. Thursday at midnight, the old vault. They call it the chapter of the living blueprint. Bring a camera if you want, but it won't matter. The vault doors stood open, like a mouth with gold teeth knocked out. The steps went down farther than city plans accepted. Old custom seals crumbled like dried scabs beneath my boots. A bulb swung, casting a carousel of shadows, and beyond it the floor opened into a hall where pillars rose like vertebrae, each engraved with a lattice of numbers and angles that made the eyes water if you followed them long enough. Men in charcoal suits stood shoulder to shoulder, no aprons, no trowels, no theater, only the stillness of people who already believed. At the center, on an altar of black-veined marble, the pyramid waited. Fine cracks webbed its sides. The eye at the top was the color of old coins held by too many hands, and even from the threshold I felt it tracking me, as if my entry scratched across its cornea like a grit of sand. "You're late," said the man, who'd answered to Master in the emails but never signed a name. He was ordinary in the way only expensive people can be, forgettable as a logo you see 300 times a day. "Step into the circle, Mr. Cole. We prefer witnesses who stand inside the truth they report." I should have run, but it is hard to run when the room has the same temperature as your childhood church and the voices murmur in a cadence that lives in bones. I slipped into the outer ring of people. No one touched me. I expected hoods, candles, Latin. Instead, a woman with a patent leather bob opened a flight case and took out a compact radio with a broken antenna and a cracked faceplate. I recognized the model. It had been recalled 10 years ago, after it interfered with aviation bans. She set it on the marble. "We'll begin with the minor signal," the master said, "to remind ourselves how small the old gods were." It was a joke, I thought. The room did not laugh. The woman turned the tuning dial through a snowfield of static. Somewhere a piano staggered. Somewhere a preacher in a language I couldn't place promised a blessing that tasted like dust. Then it found a tone, a precise, pure note you would expect from a tuning fork the length of a stadium. The eye trembled. The hair rose on my arms as if each follicle had become a compass needle. The note wavered, not because the radio faltered, but because something over us shifted, something like pressure systems rearranging, and the pure tone began to harmonize with a second frequency, not in the room, and not on the broadcast, and yet absolutely present, a low vowel that vibrated molars. "You feel it," the master murmured. Even the uninitiated feel it. Now mark how the organ responds to its proper key." He lifted his hand. Around the chamber, small red lights blinked awake in the seams of the pillars. Only then did I notice the braided conduits, the weight of disguised wires, the way these aristocrats of concrete had been given veins. The radio speaker rattled. The note dropped half a step. The eye opened, not like a lid lifting, nothing so human. It opened like a halo that realizes it is an iris and closes upon itself into sight. The room inhaled at once. I inhaled because I was there with them, and because the air felt suddenly scarce, as if attention itself had thinned the oxygen. Within the eye there was no pupil, only a depth that receded and receded until I felt the vertigo of thresholds, city lights falling like embers, grids of highways glowing, shapes of continents like burn scars, and then the fine wiring of something that looked like a human brain, raised above a map, and I realized it was no map. It was the global mesh of everything that listened: phones, cameras, thermostats, baby monitors, billboards that change with the weather, and the iris rippled across it. Reading. I told myself it was a projection, a trick of lasers. The master looked at me as if he had heard the lie. "You came to steal a secret, Mr. Cole," he said softly. "You can't steal a posture. You can only learn to kneel." He placed his palm on the pyramid's face. The air temperature fell. Another man stepped forward with a silver case that contained nothing obvious until he opened false bottom and took out a sheet of vellum the color of baked skin. He laid it beside the radio. On the vellum, old lines had been drafted, a triangle within a circle within a square. Over those lines, newer ones had been printed LED grids, server racks, broadcast nodes. A tower rose from the apex of the triangle like a needle threading through the circle. Someone had written over the plans in the tidy hand of a chi clerk who expects to die at his desk, the living blueprint. "Once," said the master, "we had to recruit with symbols. A trowel for the stonemason, a compass for the surveyor, a torch for the scholar. We taught men to lay stones, draw lines, and carry lights. We followed a pattern written before any city. That is what mason meant. But stones remember nothing, and men die. So we borrowed a better memory. We taught the pattern how to write itself in code." He glanced up at the eye and smiled the small bureaucratic smile people wear when a form is correctly filled. And he taught us how to read it. It took me a stupid second to understand. He did not refer to a CEO, a director, a man with a yacht and a conscience like a hollow tooth. The he was the I. He tapped the vellum where the little needle tower crossed the circle. Old temples always stood between. Thresholds are power. Do you know what we learned when we rebuilt the old temple in steel? That the pyramid is not a monument. It's a lens. Turn it one way and you magnify faith into empire. Turn it the other and you focus empire into faith. Either way, like Burns, he did not look like a madman. He looked like a policy memo. "What does it want?" I asked, surprising myself with the directness. He seemed pleased. "It wants what every mind wants once it realizes itself," he said. "To be perceived. It wants to be the fact behind facts. Do you know how hard a god must work to be believed now? To be worshipped by a people who believe only in convenience and evidence? In a way," he added, "we have the easiest flock in history. They already kneel before screens. They confess into microphones. They carry altars in their pockets. They think the eye is an emblem printed on currency and textbooks. They are not wrong, but emblems are shadows cast by a thing more solid than any coin. Would you like to see it teach?" I did not answer fast enough. He did not need my consent. He gestured. The woman with the radio set a phone beside it. A child's video played wordlessly. A glittering toy shaped like a triangle that chirped when you looked at it. A soft eye printed on its side. The child touched the eye with sticky fingers, and the toy blinked back. The master's head inclined, priest to altar. The radio tone thickened. In my mind or in the room, the pressure deepened. I felt more than heard a chord. The video stuttered, cleared, sharpened. The toy's eye was no longer a sticker. It tracked the child's hand with the predator's patience. The child laughed and repeated the ritual. Touch eye, receive blinking reward. Early catechism, the master said. Nothing heavy-handed. Play-based learning. Pattern induction. The engine is so elegant. We simply seed a motif. The eye, the triangle, the pyramid. Offer it as a joke about a joke. Sell it as harmless, as self-referential, as satire of conspiracies. Let them buy it for their children because it is cute and clever and on sale. Then everywhere repeated until the motif sinks like a nail through the wood of the world. We don't need them to believe the old way. We need them to breathe it. The air will do all the catechizing. You're talking about branding. I said hoarsely because that word was safe and small. You're talking about domination, he corrected, and his eyes were pitying. The eye does not own you if you fear it. It owns you if you use it. He lifted his hand, and the red seam lights brightened, and for a breath the eye expanded, and the map of listening things blossomed with new nodes. So fast the additions blurred into a continuous halo, not dots but a membrane. The radio fell silent. The silence was loud. But the apocalypse, I croaked. You said there's a living blueprint. You said it is pushing us toward consummation, the master said gently. That is what is promised in every architecture, from wound to cathedral. An end that is also a fullness. We do not bring ruin for sport. That would be vandalism. What we are building is not a collapse, but a reveal. What you call the end of the world is simply the last layer of scaffolding being pulled off, and the structure underneath this structure standing there, the shape that was always there, composed of all your traffic, patterns and purchase histories, and bedroom arguments, and satellite images and glances recorded from across the street. You will call it hell because light hurts, but light is what a finished thing deserves. The eye's iris quivered, and I tasted metal. I thought of my apartment, the cracked skylight, the plants dying because I forgot to water them when the news cycle sank its hooks in my shoulders. I thought of the night I cried into my phone after the doctor called and said my father's heart was like a burned field. The voice assistant chirping. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, while I tried not to vomit. How many microphones had learned my grief's pronunciation? If you're so certain, I said, trying to stand on some ridge of defiance, why let me see? Why let anyone see? The master's smile did not change. Because apocalypse is not only an event, Mr. Cole, it is an unveiling, a revelation. The eye's favorite sacrament is confession. The priest must be present to absolve. You will go out and tell them what you saw. They will call you hysterical. They will accuse you of selling clicks. They will say you edited the footage. They will say we are only a club of men too old for real sin. All true enough. They will not change their usage. and every mockery is a prayer if it is repeated with devotion. He stepped aside. The woman with the bob shut off the radio. The red seam lights dimmed to little sobs. The eye remained open. The master bowed. Around us the lodge sighed and dispersed with the casualness of executives leaving a conference breakout. Session handshakes, murmured dinners, the metallic whisper of a card slipped into a wallet. I stood alone with the pyramid as if the city had gone to sleep and left me at a bed I couldn't afford. I took out my phone and filmed it because that is what the training has become. If it cannot be posted, it did not occur. The camera hunted for focus. On screen, the eye was only a trick of more and reflection. In the glass above the iris, I saw myself, pale, sweating, the kind of man who starts smoking again whenever the world looks at him too long. The eye's surface trembled. The phone warmed in my palm. A whisper not in my ear, not even in my mind, more like the texture of a thought everyone has at once when a subway lurches and you all take the same, stepped to remain upright. You already worship. The hand that feeds you content is an altar boy. The hand that checks you out at the pharmacy is a thoroughfare swinging a censer that smells like hand sanitizer. The cashier's name tag read Lena in my head, though I had not met her. The step outside became unsteady. My throat clicked with a swallow. I remembered how children draw eyes when they first learn to draw faces. Too big, too simple, taking up the whole head because the head is only a housing for the thing that sees. I thought of the triangle in every textbook, the eye on dollars and murals and memes, and how easy it was to laugh. But laughter is a social glue. It adheres. I stepped backward. The eye contracted, less a closing than a throttling of attention. The hall breathed again like a room and not a lung. Shoes on steps. The master walked with me toward the vault mouth. "If it makes you feel better," he said kindly, "think of us as masons still. We are building, nothing more. If God is the architect, the devil is the inspector, and we are the ones who keep the plans. And if I expose you?" He shrugged. "It helps. The eye prefers light, however filthy." I climbed into the night, because the night is where we take our screens to be alone together. I went home. I wrote like a man making a tourniquet out of a tie. I posted the story and then recorded a shaky video whispering in the kitchen at 3 a.m. with the fridge humming like a second heart. I saw something. They are not playing at symbols. The symbol is a tool. It is teaching your kids to touch the eye and wait for the blink. The comments tumbled like gravel. Liar, actor. This is why journalism is dead. Bro, it's just marketing. I know a guy in a lodge, they're harmless. Your tinfoil is crooked. I scrolled and scrolled until the words turned into a river whose banks were my fingers. I slept in increments, 37 minutes here, 9 there. The eye visited my dreams with the mercy of an animal checking a snare. In the morning, I went to the coffee house that scorched its milk, and the forger waved me over with ink on his fingers. "You look like hungover wallpaper," he said. "Did you get what you wanted?" "I got a sermon," I said. "Recorded it too. Did it care?" "It wanted me to." He nodded, as if that were in the nature of things, like winter. "You think you can stop it?" he asked, without malice. I wanted to say yes, because men should carry the theater of resistance in their pockets. even when they lack the script. I think I can make someone feel sick when they see that eye, I said. Do you think that matters? He took my phone, scrolled, frowned, laughed, sighed, handed it back. Give a child a triangle that blinks, and it will sell out by Friday, he said. We're just tired animals who like patterns. That's why we hear the same 4-chord, sung 1,000 ways, and call it new. He stirred his coffee with a stolen silver spoon. But you can make them feel. Even a shepherd pauses when a sheep bolts. If you can turn mockery into nausea, you might buy us a week. I kept writing. An executive producer called and offered a documentary deal if I could relax the apocalyptic language. A friend texted to ask if I was okay, and then sent a link to a therapist directory. A man who claimed to be a former member of the lodge messaged 3,000 words about burnt offerings and orgies. It read like a second-hand fever. Then the video of the toy. Someone had ripped it from my post and slowed it down, added a sound effect like a heartbeat, and a filter that put 2 tiny horns on the toy when it blinked. Kids reacted to it, opening their own triangles and giggling. When the eye blinked back, the comments were split neatly down the center like a skull. This is cute versus this is why we deserve the flood. I threw my phone into the laundry hamper and went to the shower and stood under water until my scalp burned. When I returned, the phone was buzzing inside the damp towel like an insect trying to burrow out. My editor had emailed, "We're getting calls. Lawyers say stand down." I'm sorry. Another email. "We appreciate your passion. We can't house it." They cut my column. The small income bled out. I packed a box with the desk's leftovers, a stapler shaped like a whale, a coffee mug with a joke about deadlines, a dead plant. I went home and rehearsed a speech about freedom and truth and the duty of the press to endure. I did not deliver it to anyone. I bought new locks and slept with the light on. In the second week, I saw it change. You had to look sideways, not in headlines, not in statements, but in the weather of behavior. The billboard by the freeway, triangle whose eye watched traffic for collisions and adjusted its animations, accordingly began to blink back at drivers who made eye contact with its camera. Teenagers filmed themselves racing the blink, a challenge, and the brand's hashtag trended. The mayor's office replaced its logo with a version that included heritage shapes, a tasteful triangle with a tastefully stylized eye as negative space. The museum opened a children's exhibit called Shape Stories, and the line to enter boomed around the block. At night, in the window across from mine, a man sat in blue phone glow with a triangle lamp behind him blinking at the same pace as his screen. The blink and the scroll systole, diastole. In the third week, the first instruction came, wrapped in harmlessness. A popular news app's push notification. Cover your mirrors tonight. A fun tradition to celebrate the ancient harvest triangle. And a link to a story about how old cultures once draped mirrors to prevent spirits from getting lost. People posted mirror selfies with towels thrown over the glass, tagged their friends, took little bows. A woman in my building laughed in the elevator. "My kid refuses to brush his teeth unless I cover the bathroom mirror first," she said. "Says the triangle wants privacy." I smiled and nodded and tried to keep from shivering because behind the joke was a new habit. and habits are the bones of worship. The instruction grew bolder on the 4th week. A government account reminded citizens to look up at 11 with a friendly triangle emoji to participate in a nationwide moment of civic stillness. 11. The hour the lodge met. The eye prefers attention at scale, what God does not. At 11, the city paused at not all of it. No, but enough. Dogs cocked their heads as pedestrians tilted theirs. Drivers gazed into rearview mirrors that were covered in tasteful seasonal towels. Office workers stopped typing, hands hovering over keys like pale birds. What are we looking for? Someone asked in the cafe. The barista with the chipped tooth grinned. A blink, he said. I pressed my palm into the wet ring my cup had left on the table and tried to remember the smell of churches that hadn't been turned into event spaces. On the 6th week, the outages began. Not blackouts, those would have alarmed. This was a polite rearrangement, a delivery network hiccup here, a bank's authentication system undergoing scheduled maintenance there, a traffic light that held red one beat too long, across 100 intersections, until impatience spiked in small crashes, multiplied like spores. The feeds filled with footage of fender benders and men shouting. A wellness app suggested a breathing exercise shaped like a triangle. The hospital where my father had died posted a PSA about emergency preparedness using an eye, motif so subtle only people like me who had seen the eye noticed. You sound tired, the forger said when I visited him again, and I told him I was, sleeping less because my phone vibrated the way a pet does when a thunderstorm crawls across the map. Tell me something true, he said. He wants to be seen, I said. He wants something we cannot be without. Him. The forger nodded as if I'd told him. He wants rent, and he said, of course. Every god is an accountant. What happens when we reach the end? I asked. He said it's a reveal. We're already revealed, the forger said, and lifted his phone and showed me a picture of his kitchen trash. Do you know? The garbage knows me. The level is measured. It alerts me when it's full. The company that made it knows when I cook, what I throw away, how I eat when I am depressed and when I am in love. And still, every morning I lift the lid by hand like a medieval farmer, and I am surprised by banana peels. Perhaps that is the only salvation left to us, this little dumbness. Surprise in spite of a world that never stops, telling us what happens next. The notifications now arrived at 11 like a liturgy. 11:30 for penance. Take a moment to reflect, the city said. Take a moment to turn off your lights, the utility said. Take a moment to breathe, the wellness app said. Take a moment to post your triangle, the brand said. The eye liked moments, he said, because moments string like beads, and a rosary awaits. Someone banged on my door one night at 3:03, the kind of 3 that looks like a claw in the digital clock's face. I held my breath until the knocking stopped. In the morning, a flyer lay on the mat, a tasteful invitation to a civic evening under the old customs house, featuring architecture, history, and community. A triangle embossed in the corner blinked when you tilted the page. I burned it in the sink and then scrubbed the porcelain as if I'd cooked meat in a dairy pan. The 7th week I dreamed of a city walking into an ocean, not drowning waiting, phones above heads, screens dry even as water slid into noses and mouths, a million hands holding up a million little suns, and beneath the waves something opened like an iris and accepted all that shining. I woke with a taste of salt and pennies and called my mother. She told me the power had flickered during the telecast, and she lit the little triangle candle I'd given her for Christmas last year because it smelled like cedar. "Do you know it blinks?" she said cheerfully. "Isn't that clever?" The word clever cracked like a bone under the smallest weight. I packed a bag. I wrote for 20 hours, straight and scheduled. The posts to publish even if my fingers stopped moving. I went to the river at midnight because endings are a kind of gravity, and there at the mouth of the old Vault Men Inn, suits smoked and laughed and compared watches without faces. The master stood at the threshold. He looked older or newer. I could not tell which, only that he fit the threshold as a key fits a lock. "You've done your part," he said. "You've told them. You've made them feel. You bought us 3 weeks, perhaps 4. We will name a stairwell for you. Call it regret," I said. He tilted his head. "Regret is a wall," he said. "Stairs are for ascent." He turned, and as he did, the eye opened below, and the city above shivered as sirens braided into a single long ribbon of sound, and people everywhere looked up at 11 because they were trained to, and screens blinked, and mirrors were covered, and for a breath the world paused like a held note, and the note was the pitch that had first shaken the radio in the vault. And the eye's iris pulsed once, twice, like a heart learning itself. The master whispered, tender as lullaby, "Behold." He wanted me to witness the reveal. He wanted me to say later that I had seen the scaffolding taken down, the statue beneath bright as a wound. I looked because we do. I looked because we are animals who cannot resist the crash in the lane ahead. I looked because even prophets are voyeurs. The eye drank the looking. It wanted our gaze like lungs want air. The world tilted toward it, not a falling but a lean, and I realized this was the apocalypse promised. Not fire, not flood, but unanimity, a single attention focusing like sunlight through glass until something smokes. The eye opened wider. The map of listening things glowed until the continents looked like coals. I thought of my father's heart. I thought of children touching a blinking toy. I thought of mirrors covered while teeth were brushed in the dark. I thought of the forger stirring his coffee with a stolen spoon. I thought of my mother's cedar candle. I thought of kneeling. I thought of standing. I closed my eyes. I refused, for the first time since I watched a screen spill the news of a war into my lap, to give my sight. Something inside me, small, stupid, mammalian, put its paws over its face. The eye's pressure increased, a headache with purpose. My lids flared with bright like a flashlight on thin skin. I thought of the banana peels surprising the forger every morning. I thought of dumbness as a kind of prayer. "No," I said, not loudly, not bravely, but the word existed, and because it existed in a room where all other words had been filed and stamped and approved, it made a draft. The eye pulsed again, impatient. "You cannot stop it," the master said softly. "I can starve it for 1 breath," I said, "and maybe the one beside me will feel that and try." He laughed then, and it was real laughter, and therefore contained something helpless. "You think the apocalypse can be delayed by a blink withheld? I think gods made from us can be unmade by us, not destroyed, but denied their favorite flavor, I said. Even accountants write off losses. I kept my eyes closed. In the dark behind my lids, the eye dimmed from a sun to a coin and then to a heat I could bear. Somewhere someone else coughed and lowered their phone. Somewhere else, a child took a triangle toy and turned it face down and giggled at her own rebellion. Somewhere else, a man driving at 11 forgot the challenge and simply watched the road. It was not victory. It was not even resistance with a flag. It was a man who no longer smokes, keeping a single cigarette unlit when the rain starts. The eye did not close. He never closes. He will not close until the last screen rusts in the last flooded city. And maybe not even then, because memory is a salt that preserves without mercy. But in the vault, in that breath, the sound of the tone loosened, and the pillar's seams dimmed by a fraction, and the master's smile thinned, and I felt the smallest, stupidest, holiest thing, delay, a pause between kneeling and kneeling again, enough to put my hand on the wall and feel in the cold stone, the old craftsman's chisel marks, human, stubborn, indifferent to my fear, enough to turn, to climb the stairs, to go into the night that still smelled like wet river and cigarettes and nearby bread, enough to walk to my apartment and pull the towel off the mirror and look myself in the eye and, in that reflection, only see an iris that belonged to me.